Well, let's take a moment and talk a bit about how is it that depression works. For many of you who may be suffering from depression, understanding just the dynamics of depression, how does it work and how does it keep you trapped? Let's break that down for you. Now, first of all, you may have some history that is genetic, right? And we don't need to get into all the details of that, but usually people will have some kind of history that's genetic or biological. And now, this genetic biological history can sometimes interact with sort of the experiences that you've had over the course of your life, and these can create different kinds of risks for depression. Now, that in itself doesn't explain too much, but if you get the right kind of stressful life event, right? Usually some kind of stressful life event would involve some kind of role change, right? Something could be positive or negative in your life that requires your sense of identity and who you are and what you're doing in your life to change. So you may be graduating high school or graduating college, or you may be getting married, or you may be getting ready to have a child. Any one of these things, they're positive life experiences, but they're role changes, and that can be actually a stressor. At the same time, other things can be stressors that are negative, often the inverse of those positive things. So, for example, you drop out of high school, or you drop out of college, or an engagement fails, or a relationship fails. In other instances, you can have changes in one's health status, being diagnosed with a heart disease or cancer or diabetes or Parkinson's disease, any of these types of changes. So negative changes, positive changes, both are stressors. And then, of course, relationship conflicts, right? Anytime you're in conflict with someone, and depending on how close the relationship is or how important the relationship is, from being a boss to a coworker to a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, parents, any of those kind of conflicts can also be a stressful life event. Obviously, death of someone important to you or loss, right? Now, we talk about death as a special kind of loss. Of course, if you move and lose all your friends, or your friend and you, or boyfriend and you, or girlfriend and you get in an argument and you break up, that's a loss too, but death is a special kind of loss. And then loneliness in itself can be a result of these other events here, or it may be long-standing loneliness that may be related to just some social skill issues going on. Now, these are the kind of background factors, right, that interact with this, and then your life experiences here, and then something comes along, some stressful life event that triggers some brain change. So life events are experienced at a physical level. You get a brain change, and your brain basically stops producing the kind of chemistry, usually some form of serotonin, right, or dopamine, changes in the brain that lead to a loss of motivation, energy, and pleasure. So we're back here to a loss of energy, motivation, and pleasure. Now, in and of itself, this is not depression. But when you experience this brain-based loss of energy, motivation, and pleasure, how you respond to that, how you respond to those feelings, can begin the depressive loop. So if you if you respond in a depressive way, in a depressive manner, it usually, what that means is that you get locked into an avoidance pattern. Now, when you get into an avoidance pattern, you begin to isolate, you begin to withdraw, you disengage from the activities that gave you a sense of pleasure, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. So a lot of times when people feel like they're not energized, like they're not motivated, then their response is to just sort of go into the shutdown mode. So they stop doing the things that they need to do, they stop doing the things that give them pleasure, and they stop doing things that give them a sense of connectedness to other people. Now, very interestingly, when you engage in that avoidance behavior, right, it has a feedback loop back to the energy and motivation. See, the less that you do, right, the less you'll want to do. Very important. So the less that you do, the less you'll want to do. In part, it's because the brain back here, right? So the brain basically says, look, if you're not going to do things, right? If you're not going to engage in these valued behaviors over here, if you're going to do that, then we're not going to give you the energy and the motivation and the pleasure that you need. We're not going to produce chemistry that you're not going to use. So the result is then the less you do, the less you want to do. And again, this doesn't mean that you don't want to do it. It just means that you don't feel like doing it. And then if you engage in more avoidance behavior, the worse this gets. Now, a couple things happen here. One is when you're in this avoidance pattern, you tend to retreat inward. Right? That means that your attention tends to go inside your head where you ruminate. Right? Now, rumination means that you tend to repeatedly ask yourself, why do I feel this way? What is wrong with me? Why don't I feel like I used to? Why don't I feel energized or motivated? Why do I have to feel this way? Am I being punished? Is it because I'm such a bad person or a worthless person? And so a lot of rumination, and then also a lot of worry. So worry and rumination tend to be very close cousins. Rumination tends to be about, why do I feel so badly? What's wrong with me? Why is this happening? It tends to be about the past primarily. Worry tends to be more about what if, right? It tends to think of the worst possible scenarios and expect that they're going to happen. And then another close cousin in here is hopelessness and helplessness. Hopelessness is the sense that nothing will ever work out for me. Nothing ever does. Nothing ever will. And helplessness means nothing I do will make a difference, so what's the point in trying? So now people get stuck in their head and get locked into these patterns of thinking. And if you can, take a moment and look at the mindful river. That is another video that I have that helps explain how this pattern of thinking gets stuck in your consciousness and how your state of mind gets linked into that, and you can hardly break out, but it gives you strategies to do it. So now people are locked into this pattern. And a couple other things is that when you stop doing these things, right, then there tends to be more negative feedback, right, in terms of creating more of those stressful life events that we described earlier. When you stop doing the things that you need to do and you withdraw from people and isolate, then you tend to get more criticism, You get more negative feedback from your environment, from family, friends. Things don't get done, and then this new information from these stressful life events, well, that just fits right into here and is sort of grist for the depression mill. And stick around for the next video, and we'll show you how you can break out of this depressive loop and get yourself back on track to changing the way that you feel about yourself and change your life in a very powerful way.